almost at quorum. We will get underway in a minute here regardless, because I know some of you are on quite late. So thanks for joining in your nighttime. And for those of you who had to get up particularly early for this, thanks for that as well. We are waiting for one or two more people to get on. I just got introduced to, I think is Nutikestit, which I pasted into chat there, which is like a candy exchange in Finland, but it looks from the picture like a cookie swap in the US. And why did I paste that in? Because it was one of the many tabs that I'm trying to close now. All right, and I think that brings us to quorum with the last join there. So let's get underway. Today is December the 14th, 2023, and this is the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. This will be our last meeting of the year. So excited for everybody to join us today and wrap up a couple important topics that we have. If you're not familiar with the consortium, or this is your first time joining, we are an open and collaborative community. Everybody is welcome to come and contribute. We abide by the Linux Foundation's antitrust policy. If you'd like to read more about that, it's on linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy. For our final meeting of the year, we will follow our normal format, which after we do roll call of the voting members, we'll make sure that everybody is familiar with everybody else here to the extent that we can. So if you haven't introduced yourself before, please be prepared to give a few sentences to say who you are, where you're coming from, and what your interests are in confidential computing. And we'll do that right after formal roll call. We've got to change to how we're going to approve minutes going forward, so we'll touch on that shortly. We've got an action item to discuss for the project mentors, and Ben added one other thing. Remind me what that was, Ben.
We were going to discuss, oh man, it'll come to me.
Okay, oh, this is up, we've changed the process.
Change the process for, yeah, new projects and charters. Yeah, we'll discuss that.
Okay. And then we have Jörg joining us again to wind up the proposal for Coconut SVSM. We have Dan Williams with us today to talk about kernel ABI that recently got upstreamed, and that will segue nicely into the proposal for our kernel working group, or SIG. And if we have time remaining, we will try to wrap up any last minute, documenting any last minute accomplishments for 2023, so that we can put out probably a blog in the beginning of the new year with all the great things that we have accomplished this year. Did I miss anything that anybody was anticipating covering today? All right. Well, with that, let's.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have one topic.
Yeah.
And The GRC is working on relationships with government agencies, and one of those in question is the Defense Innovation Board. So we set up a meeting, or we're setting up a meeting for Monday that comes, and they're looking for some read ahead. So we wanted to sort of give people a short update on that topic. Mark, is that also is that consistent with what you think we'd want to do here?
Yes, absolutely. If anybody wants to, provide them information or participate in a discussion, that would be fantastic.
And this was for an RFC?
There was a request for input at some time back. And if we can get something together for this Friday, we can submit it. It remains confidential, but the main purpose is to provide some context for a discussion with the Defense Innovation Board managers in the DoD on Monday. So it's not a fully open document that we would be providing them.
Okay, and that needs to be in on Friday.
Friday morning is the last day to take any formal input.
All right, thanks. And I did see messages that I did not read fully on the GRC mail list. So if you are interested to know what this means in greater detail, you can go pop over to the listserv and look at the GRC posts. And anybody who wants to drop that into the Zoom chat, feel free to do that as well. All right, thanks for keeping an eye on that sort of thing for us. One of the main goals we've had for this year is to get more engaged in the governance processes. We have our governance risk and compliance SIG. And so being able to get in front of government RFIs and other sorts of things like that helps us make sure that people are aware of the applicability of confidential computing. With that, let's check who we have here today. I did not see Giuseppe on, and I do not see Nathaniel or Eric Northup, but then we get into, we've got Catalin on from Google. Thanks for joining. Did Howard make it today? It's very late at night for Howard, so we do not see him. I am almost certainly here. And I see Alec on, and we have Yash. Thanks for joining, Yash. And Mark, are you alternative for Nathaniel?
Are you asking me?
Sorry, Mark Munier. Other Mark. Who I see is connected with video, but not audio. So might be having some trouble getting in. At any rate, without ARM, I think we are still at quorum. Yash, love the hat.
So, thank you. So Dan, I'm actually not too well. So if I get worse, I might drop early. So you have quorum now, but you might not have quorum 20 minutes from now. I'm at 50% today, and Lily couldn't join, so I'm here, but I might not stay for the full call.
Okay, and I missed the first part of what you said. Did you say you're ill?
Yeah, I'm ill.
Sorry
Yes.
about that.
Thank you.
All right, hope you feel better soon. All right, so if this is your first time here, we've asked that if you want to introduce yourself, if you haven't introduced yourself twice, because it kind of takes a while to get to know people, feel free to pop off of mute. Let us know where you're coming from, either geographically or what company you're with, and what your interest in confidential computing is.
Go for it. I think this is my second, maybe third time introducing myself, but maybe not to TAC. I officially am going to be coming on as community architect for the CCC next week, which is important because that gives us 2 weeks for me to be officially and legally able to engage, meaning next Monday, I would love to engage in that call. So get in touch with me. So I'll leave my information in the chat right here for us to talk, but it really means we've got 2 weeks to really get off the ground with community architecture. I would like to be in touch. I want your opinions. I'm getting going for 2024. So hello to everyone who I don't know formally yet. That means we're probably going to be talking a lot soon.
All right, thanks so much for joining, Sal. We're really excited to have you on as community architect.
And then Dan Williams, coming from Oregon. I'm on the Intel Linux core kernel team. I previously worked on getting a new application program interface in for persistent memory into the kernel, and then Intel stopped doing persistent memory. So, but then they said, hey, you're pretty good at getting stuff into the kernel. Can you help us with getting secure I/O? So Intel's calling it TDX Connect support into the kernel. So either they think I do a good job, or I'm the harbinger of death for this. So we'll see. Either one of those two things is going to be true. But I'm coming from the core kernel team.
Moving from persistent memory to encrypted memory. So it's really the same thing.
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah. Thanks for joining today, Dan. All right, well, that might be everybody who is new for this session. So thanks for joining. And if anybody didn't get a chance to introduce themselves and wants to, feel free to interrupt again, or just drop your stuff into chat if you prefer to do it that way. I'll get chat up so I can actually see if somebody does that. All right. So previously, we've been voting on the TAC minutes, and that kind of consumes a bunch of our time. So it was great. People have already approved offline over GitHub. So we're just going to move forward with that process going forward. And our existing GitHub process calls for just 2 members to approve before we merge, which is different than getting like a full quorum vote. But I think when we've talked about this in the past, it's been recognized that we can always go back and amend the minutes after they've been merged. So there's not really a whole lot of risk in doing this sort of thing offline. So again, thanks for everybody for doing your homework before the meeting, and I won't spend any more time on that. So action items, as we've had the last couple projects join, we've looked to get mentors, but and I'll drop down to the old version of the table. Or, you know what? I'll use the new version of the table that shows each mentor that we have from the TAC. And these are people who are regular TAC attendees. You're not necessarily like the voting representative of a premier company, but in some cases these are the voting members. And as we've added the last couple projects, it's been harder and harder to find people who will step forward for that TAC mentor role. And so the proposal is really, there's 3 options for us to discuss. And one is that we just start round robin these. So if nobody from the TAC community steps up, we'll just kind of go through in alphabetical order of company and assign one of the voting members. Second option is we just decide people aren't getting value out of this, or they're unable to really address it in a way that would provide value. So let's just stop doing it. And then the third option is that instead of, when we think about trying to scale, because we're maybe going to like have double the amount of projects by the end of 2024 than we started at 2023 with, that maybe a more scalable thing is we look for topic areas that are common amongst the projects, and that each one of us as TAC members volunteers to be a subject matter expert available to CCC project maintainers. Other roles that this TAC mentor has tried to fill in the past is communicating between the TAC and the project as sort of a messenger. But I think that has not always been really efficient. We can pretty much send notes directly. So we would be dropping that aspect of it. And Lily had helped construct this based on some of her conversations with the projects in her role for doing the cross-project initiative work this year. And Lily's not able to join us today to talk about that more, but I think I've sort of summarized what that amounted to in the third proposal there. So I want to make sure that the people who are currently project mentors or who are voting members of the TAC or otherwise have an opinion on this kind of work share what they think about these three options.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I guess to me, one of the most important mentoring issues is understanding the connection to other projects and getting input when there is an opportunity for some kind of synergy. And so I kind of like proposal 3 a lot, but I would want to sort of suggest that that we find somebody and I think that we have a recent new team member that might be able to serve that function. But that to me is one of the most important mentoring activities.
Go ahead, Yash.
So I wanted to know if any of the existing project maintainers can speak about their experience. Like, were the mentors helpful? Did they reach out? Yeah, so from this list, the existing maintainers of any of the projects, did you reach out to the mentors, and what was your experience like? Was it helpful?
Yeah,
That
so
might
looking
help
at
us.
this list, I don't know if we actually have any of these people. So Dave Thaler was the mentor for OE until a couple weeks ago. So I've just put Alex's name in there today. Nick's not here. Eric Voigt often is here, but not today. Lily couldn't make it. Tate's not here. Thomas is still quite active, particularly in the attestation SIG, but he's transitioned his TAC role over to Nathaniel. And with the time zone, Howard is not necessarily always at this meeting. So maybe that says something alone about this mentor column. Sal?
Yeah, just a quick comment on this. All of this good. I would like to keep these at least points of communication into place, and they can be really lightweight. Only thing is, if you're going to do developer interventions with maintainers, you got to make it worth their time. So I'm just going to throw in CLO monitor here into the chat and say that if we're doing interventions, right, if we're going to do communicating interventions inside of our portfolio, make them meaningful and quantitative, right? So if we can get security scores, anything up, right? But the maintainer needs to know what their end goal is in case they want to be doing it and executing that in an independent and interesting way, which is always really cool for security interventions, right? Do something better than I'm recommending. But I would love to see this direction, right? What do we do as a flat floor standard when we're communicating out to maintainers?
Mm-hmm. So I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with developer interventions. Can you give me some examples of what that means?
Yeah, so one that we've really been focusing on CNCF for the last 2 years, a good example of an intervention are security slams, right? So this is above and beyond. It's not a bug bash going in and finding bugs. What we're going in is addressing and giving security information and enablement to maintainers, not contributors, So this is going in and making sure that the repositories have all of the security metrics that they need and that they have the security procedures for the community that engages with them as well, right? So when we're doing those kind of interventions, what we're doing is making sure that there's something at the repository structurally, not an individual maintainer, but systematically now that works well to make that a sustainable project. So that's why I look at those external metrics that the rest of the organization is looking at, because they help us to get there. But these are not exclusive. I'm just saying really lovely when we have a dashboard to show our projects improvement, meaning we have to have a quantitative differential.
Thank you. Alec?
I'm still not getting this 100%. Some a little bit more background would help me. Are we talking about just SDLC practices, like having static code analysis and code coverage and that kind of stuff? Or are we talking about something different?
Yeah, so those are the basic enablements of do the basics to not have a wildly porous open source project. Those are supply chain stats. Those are some of the practices we put into place. But when I want a clear communication point to maintainers, it's because over the course of the next year, there are going to be additional requirements for security if they're needed, right? So security is one of those interventions where I do need a clear point of contact for maintainers if another security intervention comes in, not a bug patch, not a line of code patch, but a process patch.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, and I think what we talked about with Lily, this might have been DM series, is that we've got the projects now a little bit better organized in the governance repo, and so we wanted at least one maintainer as a point of contact for each one of these projects. So I think Lily is going to coordinate that, as she already has some of that information. But we've gotten this a little bit more organized recently.
One more thought on the proposals for mentorship. So regarding proposals 1 and 3, we should basically sort of ask voting members to mentor. I'm a bit concerned about the additional basically time commitment tasks that not all might have. I think the model where volunteers from community are actually mentors might be more appropriate, in this context.
Okay, there's a little bit of distortion, but I think one of the things you were asking about was the amount of time.
Yeah, I have the concern that by asking implicitly that all the members are going to be mentors, that imposes sort of a time commitment that not everybody might have.
Yeah, there was definitely what's called an interest at one point, if not still, that as leaders in the community who are attached and engaged with the projects that really are the essence of the community. And so even though it is definitely a time hit to be engaged with a project on a regular basis and not just at the points where we need to go communicate something, it is, I think, important for the TAC leaders here to know what's going on with at least one project. But that doesn't exclusively mean the voting members. That means, each of us here who's a leader in the community. Chris?
Yeah, just a minor point about onboarding. For onboarding projects that have previously been under some particular company's GitHub org, it would be nice if there were a recommendation and help to, sort of set up a new org or canonically decide that all future projects should be under confidential computing's org. So I think that it's, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and this will be relevant to Jörg and others probably shortly. And what Chris just went through recently, when we bring in a project, we don't have what some other Linux foundations have done, which Linux Foundation organizations have done, to have a single GitHub org and try to put all of the projects underneath that org. We've let each project have its own GitHub org, and that's often facilitated having a profusion of repositories that they can do all the administrative management for. So I think that's a good continuous improvement observation, Chris. And if you've got some specific thoughts, feel free to create an issue for it, and then we can track it that way.
Okay, I think my main thing would be, if whatever CCC decides, it should actually help do that onboarding. And if it wants new domain or new org names for each project, then those should be owned and set up by the CCC. And procedurally, just transferring stuff over would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. All right.
If somebody can put a link in where I should add that suggestion, it would be great.
Yeah, so if you go to the issues link that I dropped there, that'll take you to the mentor issue, but you can just create another issue at that same site. Thank you. And then Ben, why don't we updates on this project proposal change, process change, and then we will move on to Coconut after that.
Yeah, I think along the theme of continuous improvement, as I've been on this project for a couple months, I started to help some of the projects go through the graduation process. And through that, I discovered that we can optimize our intake. So one of the steps that we have for projects coming into CCC is that they create a draft charter. Turns out they're not supposed to be creating a draft charter. Draft charter is created by our legal team as part of the process. So one of the things I'll be doing next week before the holidays really kick in is doing a PR that simplifies the project proposal process and removes that step. I'll also take a stab at kind of clarifying some of the things in here. But yeah, I think this will remove one of the steps from the process, which is great, or at least remove one of the steps that's a burden for new projects. And yeah, so that's coming in shortly.
Thanks for catching that. And sorry for the rework that implies for maybe just Jörg, but for any recent project that's come through. Ultimately, you'll end up doing the same thing, which is you're going to have your name filled in on a template. So hopefully not too much of an impact, but that is out of date. And so thanks to Ben for catching that and fixing that process.
Yeah, Dan, I'll also mention, I didn't put this in the deck and I should, but I'll put it in the chat. We do have a dashboard for project status now. So if folks are interested in where things are, we're trying to track things there to make it a little bit easier for us and also for folks who are working on the project so they can see where things are.
Yep, thank you for that as well. So we tend to get a little bit stalled around this column where Linux Foundation legal will ask the project proposers to assign the name and trademark and so forth for a project, and usually that sort of stuff doesn't exist because it's not like a trademarked term, and then people have to figure out who can be the legal signer for something. So that tends to be a bit of an obstacle, but it's great to have this board now so we can see where projects are and if they're stuck, to help get them over the line once we've voted them in at the TAC.
Yeah, and some of them are waiting for board vote. I'm just waiting for a couple more are pretty close. So I was just gonna bunch them up for the board and just do like one email vote with as many of them as I can, since we don't have a board meeting until January.
That reminds me too. So I did not put it in. I skipped right over it when we skipped over the minutes, but Rian had mentioned that there is a new Linux Foundation voting tool, and we might move to that for some of the offline votes. Rian, do you have a few words you want to say about that before we switch over to Coconut?
Yes, I can quickly speak to that. So Linux Foundation have created a voting tool where voting members of any committee like the TAC or the governing board could actually vote on. So if you have a vote that you want to send out to a specific committee, you can share it with me or Ben. We can set up the vote for you. There's various options. It could be a either or vote for a yes or a no, or it could be a ranking preferential vote, or it could be, there's various, like most voting tools, there's various options. So if you have anything you want us to vote on, just share it beforehand, and we can control when the vote goes live, so we can bring it to the meeting, and in the meeting we can publish so people know why they're voting after you announced it. But you can feed us the information beforehand to populate.
That's great, thanks. There's a couple things that I like about that, including having the text spelled out beforehand so that people aren't voting on verbal statements and not really understanding what they're voting on, and then also that it reduces a little bit of list traffic from getting echoes of all the votes. All right. Let's get into our first project topic of the day then. Jörg came 2 weeks ago to our previous session and walked us through the Coconut SVSM project. He subsequently filled out our project materials, including the technical charter that we will be replacing, so sorry for that. But you should have all had an opportunity to crack open the submission document. And I can either scroll through this or I can let you drive, however you would like to do it.
As you prefer. Should I read it out and then we discuss it point by point, or what is the preferred process?
Mm-hmm. So I think since we just did this with Eyelet, I was reminded that the text in this first section is what you've gone through, I think, verbally last time. This is sort of the technical substance of the project.
Yeah.
So I think rather than reading this all out, we'll just pause here for a minute and ask if anybody had questions on the technical content of the project.
I have one question, which is, do you envision getting to a point when there is an easy way to measure and attest workloads, and if so, what is that strategy?
So Coconut, I think, can help assisting with that. It's probably not the full solution for every situation. I think where it can help attesting full workloads is when you use the service VM mode, where the Coconut runs without an OS, and you basically load the full image into the CVM. So which means the Coconut kernel and the actual workload, and get it attested at launch time. This is something that will be possible with Coconut. But when your workload runs in an OS that runs alongside the Coconut SVSM, then the full workload attestation will be done by tools in the operating system with the help of the SVSM.
Okay.
Or with the help of services.
Yeah, I think the goal that I sort of think is worthwhile, I'm sort of imagining a future in which Coconut SVSM is the default supporting facility, I don't know, software package of some kind. And I think it would be helpful if the default deployments of Coconut SVSM could support not just lift and shift applications, but also applications tailored to have trust policies around specific workloads. And so if that can be achieved in a way that a default deployment of Coconut SVSM has the ability to support both kinds of confidential computing solution, it would be very attractive.
Yeah, so Coconut aims to be a platform for all kinds of services, right? Not just attestation services or TPM or or an Epic emulation or whatever. So I don't see a reason why a service that provides what you are saying should not be possible. So that's certainly within the range of things that SVSM plans to support as a platform. So.
So how I had internalized the architecture, at least the initial architecture, is that Coconut's providing trusted security services at the firmware layer, and then either you have like a regular operating system on top of that that's within the CVM that has one or more applications within it, or you have this direct service VM mode. Is that a fair summary?
Right. Yes. Yes. It can be seen as a firmware level project in the service module mode. It actually runs below the firmware even, but yeah, so does SMM, and yeah, it's kind of similar to the firmware level in this regard. Yeah.
So the direct service VM mode is a bit like a direct boot kind of a setup, or is this a little bit different?
You mean mode number 3, just service VM?
Yeah, the service VM. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a mode where Coconut will own the whole CVM context without running an operating system alongside, and where it provides services to other CVMs. So Coconut will be the sole owner of all resources assigned to the CVM, and provide services via hypervisor provided channels, so to other CVMs on the same machine. So
let me ask a little different question. So if the question was, is this direct boot, like I want to run an application and the only thing I want underneath it is Coconut, I don't want an operating system, is that the goal? Or is this more, I want to have some sort of confidential computing service running on the platform that separate CVMs can talk to?
actually both. So you can run it as a CVM with just one small workload, basically making it somewhat similar to an enclave while running in a virtualization based TCP. Or you can run it in a mode that, or you can add services to Coconut, which provide services to actual other CVMs. For example, imagine you have a CVM architecture which does not provide memory separation within the CVM context. So you can't use the paravisor and service module modes. In that setup, you could use the service VM mode to actually provide a TPM service to other CVMs by running Coconut in a separate VM. And just relying on a hypervisor provided communication channel between the other CVMs and the service VM, which of course requires encryption, authentication, and attestation. But this mode is also possible.
Thank you.
So in this mode that you just mentioned, what's going to be included in the launch digest and reflected as the measurement in the SMP hardware report?
So in the service VM, so how Coconut boots is that the whole Coconut image, which includes the kernel and the file system, the RAM file system, is part of the initial memory image. So everything will be measured at actual VM setup time by the launch measurement. So there's no runtime measurement needed if we don't have an update mechanism, let's say it so. And there's currently no plan to have an update mechanism. So everything is measured at launch time actually, because the full service VM image or SVSM image is loaded at launch time into the CVM.
I'm curious, I see in paravisor mode that that's a good place to isolate the VTPM. Has any thought been given about a place to isolate keys so that they're inaccessible by the user mode kernel? Is that maybe another use case that would fall in there? I'm just trying to make sure I understand paravisor mode.
So isolation is a capability which is actually the goal in all three modes. The main difference of paravisor mode is that there Coconut will actually provide most services that the host hypervisor will usually provide to the guest operating system, and making them secure in this way. This means handling hypervisor intercepts. This means possibly emulating devices beyond TPMs, so that for most operations where CVM OS usually talks to the host hypervisor, in paravisor mode, the CVM OS will talk to the SVSM, and the SVSM will proxy all these requests to the host hypervisor if needed. So
I understand. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Please finish your thought.
So that's basically the paravisor mode, and in that mode you can actually run operating systems which are not enlightened for running in a CVM environment.
I get that. I understand that. And my question is more about the level of isolation provided between the paravisor itself and the guest operating system that's running in the CVM that the paravisor is serving. Would the CVM have access to all the devices inside the paravisor, or is the paravisor running at a different privileged level that would provide isolation from both the hypervisor and the platform, and also from the guest VM that it's supporting?
Yeah, so that's one of the key features for actually paravisor mode and service module mode, that in this mode, Coconut SVSM runs in a different VM privilege level.
Okay.
So it's memory-wise isolated from the guest operating system and from the hypervisor. And this is actually a requirement to implement or to securely implement services like a TPM emulation or a variable store.
And the reason I'm thinking about the Nitro Enclave use case where they use an enclave to store keys and keep the keys isolated from the actual hosting VM. That seems like a really good use case. You got a PKCS11 key release to an enclave, and the OS that's hosting that Nitro Enclave doesn't have access to the keys. It seems like this would give us an open source mechanism for providing that same feature. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's definitely, yeah, that's definitely the plan, yeah. And it's actually one of the key design points for the first two modes, to provide that memory isolation and to be a secure piece of software that can isolate secrets from the OS, like TPM keys, for example.
Cool.
I mean, for TPM keys, it's a strong requirement. Otherwise, you don't have a secure TPM when you can't isolate it from memory-wise, isolated from the OS, right?
Yep, so. Totally agree. Thanks for guiding me through that.
So, is it possible to run some sort of introspection engines in the SVSM?
Some kind of what? I didn't get that. Can you repeat that, please? Sorry, I didn't. Can you please repeat it?
So, is it possible to run something in the SVSM to examine the kernel contents or anything and report back to the back channels?
That actually requires a back channel. So the SVSM can the SVSM has full access to the higher VMPL, so to all operating system memory, so it can actually look at its memory and verify it, or whatever algorithm you want to apply, or whatever checks you want to do, and that's possible. What we haven't thought about yet is a channel actually from the SVSM to some relying party. So, but that is possible, of course. We just haven't thought about it yet.
So would that be a violation of confidential computing requirements, or?
So this is all within the scope of the CVM. So you're trusting this component as opposed to having something out of the host doing this.
Right. Yeah. So the Coconut SVSM is part of the trusted base. It runs within CVM context. And as such, it can also use hypervisor provided channels for communication with the outside. If we implement an actual driver for that. Currently, we only have a serial port driver, but that's mostly for consoles and debugging. But we can implement more, of course, if needed. So
Dan, are you aware of anyone who is looking into developing some sort of introspection tools like libvmi in SVSM?
I am not. So these are all great technical questions, and I think that we could have Jörg as a regular speaker to talk about this project. I'm going to move us forward in the document, though, just for sake of time. I know our next speaker will only have a few minutes before needing to switch to a different meeting. So I think it's pretty clear how this aligns with the consortium's mission. It's very clearly a confidential computing project. If anybody has concerns on that, though, feel free to speak up. This next section is about some of these logistical things like the logo. So there's not a logo to transfer. There's not a trademark to transfer. Probably more germane to spend a couple minutes on is the project license. And so you've got this dual under MIT and Apache. Is there anything further to say about the licensing?
No, that's a decision we made prior to publishing it in March this year. So yeah.
These are both well understood open source licenses. So it's not something that the CCC prescribes. You can use any well-recognized license, so I don't see any issue with that. And we've already gone through a good bit of the technical stuff. Do you want to say if there's any direct interaction with an existing CCC project, like as a dependency, or maybe something that you could foresee in the future?
Currently, there's no dependency on other CCC projects. There are possible synergies which are listed here, which is it can be used as a building block to port enclave-based projects to virtualization-based TCBs, broadening their scope and the hardware they are actually able to run on. and of course, it can help the attestation-related projects by providing additional means to do actual runtime attestation in CVMs. But these are the two synergies which are possible, which have not materialized yet, but we don't see a reason why they shouldn't be possible. So.
Okay, great. And then there's a breakdown of dependencies and their licensing, and that licensing is all compatible. So one of the reasons that we initially have projects list these dependencies and then update them annually is just to be cognizant of the security footprint of the project. So thanks for filling that in. And then I don't think these are necessarily standards, but thanks for filling in these specifications. I don't see any issues with those. And you're not yet at a point where you're cutting releases, and that's fine. That's another one of these project maturity things that is maybe like one of the project mentor roles to help projects mature and develop processes. Committer is used in a variety of ways, and sometimes this means to people maintainer, sometimes that means people who have write access.
Right. So these are actually all contributors we currently have, not the committers. I'm actually the only committer at the moment. But these are all people that have contributed code changes to the repository of Coconut SVSM.
Okay, thanks for recognizing everybody's contributions there. The reason that we have this question on here is to understand the survivability of the project if you win the lottery or you decide to go switch to a different company. So understanding how much breadth there is underneath the project. So long as everybody understands that Jörg is the sole maintainer right now, I think we would see that as a risk, but not as a blocking factor, particularly for the first stage project, first stage of maturity for the project.
The plan is to get to three committers or to 3 top level maintainers, but we are not at that point yet to nominate someone. So
it's totally reasonable. And the fact that you've got a security response is actually sort of a later maturity thing. So it's nice to see that you already have that already. And I think that is the end of the document. So for the TAC community generally and voting members too, is there any other questions that you have before considering including Coconut SVM in the CCC? Is there a TAC voting member that would like to initiate a vote?
I'll motion for a vote.
Thank you, Alec. Let's go ahead and go back to the list and we'll take a roll call vote here. Mark, are you filling in for Nathaniel?
Yeah, I could if needed, Dan.
Okay. Does ARM vote to approve including the Coconut SVSM project in the CCC?
We do, yep.
Great. And Catalin?
Yes.
Thank you. Intel votes yes. Alec?
I vote, excuse me, I vote aye. And while I'm at it, I'll toss my hat in as a sponsor, a mentor.
Well, that's fantastic, Alec. Thanks for that.
I have selfish motives. Much.
Well, those are the motives that last longest. So, Yash for Red Hat.
Red Hat votes to approve. Yes.
Okay, so that is a unanimous vote of those present. So congratulations, Jörg. Congratulations to the Coconut project for the first step into the CCC. So Ben will drag you over into the next column shortly, and then there will be a few other steps before you are officially a CCC project. But these are largely administrative, even if they take a bit of time.
Cool, great. Thanks everyone for your votes.
Thanks for bringing the project to us. It looks very interesting. All right, and now we need to move quite quickly to a couple of kernel topics. I've asked Dan to be here today, but he's actually double booked. So a recent survey said that when people think of Intel, they think of a Dan at Intel. They more likely think of Dan Williams than me. So I thought Dan could come and talk a little bit about kernel interaction with confidential computing. There's a recent interface that's committed to the kernel. We might not have time to talk about that today, but it's one of the motivating cases that is in this proposal to create a working group so that we can bring the two communities together. And so with that introduction, I'll ask Dan to say a few words here.
Yeah, so the this kernel sig idea is coming out of the observation that I'll have these situations where somebody says, "Hey, we talked to this other operating system company, and the person that has your similar role at that company has this feedback to Intel about TDX," and I'll say, "Oh, I have this feedback from Linux about TDX," and we end up playing telephone. Like we have somebody at Intel talking to the Linux team, we have Intel talking to other operating system teams, and they both have input, and it's like playing telephone. And so when Dan said, "Hey, what if we had a kernel SIG? Like, what if we had a place where the different kernel representatives from different operating systems could come in and have a conversation about like what do we need to do together?" If you look at ACPI working group, they have representatives from all the operating systems, but they also have this very unique process where, especially for they call it code first, where people can develop ideas in the open source community on the mailing list, and then kind of throw them at the ACPI working group to get ratified and put into the specification. And that's a very useful way to get things ratified without having to kind of worry about some of these confidentiality rules. And so when Dan proposed, like, "Hey, what if we had a kernel SIG?" I immediately thought of this code first process and a way for operating system kernel practitioners to have a forum to communicate things and then make decisions and get things ratified and post things back to hardware vendors. Say, hardware vendors, look, Linux would like this to simplification, and if all vendors can accommodate that, then it accelerates things into Linux. So that's kind of the quick run through of why I think this kernel SIG idea is interesting, and how we can just find a forum for different operating systems to all unify some of the confidential computing interfaces.
Thanks for that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So and then as we also have the architects from all of the confidential computing vendors here and the software vendors here, the opportunity to have people come in and talk about the use cases, I think really informs what a kernel interface might look like. The visibility to say, "Hey, we have this feature coming down as a hardware vendor," and say 3 other hardware vendors saying, "Oh, we have the same feature," probably also helps so that we aren't putting things into in sort of like a linear way on the Linux kernel list and expecting that gets sorted out in any fast manner.
Yeah, a bit more coordination. Yeah, and sorry to speak so short and fast about this. Yeah, I had this other meeting that came in right at the after good to this one, but I would love to come back and talk about the this unified ABI proposal that we came up with for just marshaling attestation reports and getting all the vendors into the same boat in the kernel, so we can all kind of row together. But I'll have to come back and do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, thanks. That'll be fine. I think it's an interesting motivational case for bringing this SIG forward, but it definitely doesn't block anything right now to have that come in January. So I don't know if, I think you might have to drop right now, but if anybody had a quick question for Dan as a kernel maintainer, feel free to speak up.
Yeah, but
So
otherwise,
we would like.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was supposed to do a presentation on the unified ABI, but I'll come back and do that later.
Oh yeah, so I was wondering like how is like if we want to push something like related to confidential computing, in the like as a kernel patch. So how could we go through the process? Is it possible for like for there is a documentation for the like reviewing process within CCC for this part for like in the kernel SIG? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I don't want to do is supplement the standard kernel patch submission process and require that to go through the CCC. Like the Linux kernel process should just be the Linux kernel process. The CCC is really for a kind of a clearinghouse for things that we want to kind of ratify as a specification, and that's different than a kernel change, which is more negotiated and kernel specific, and it's not based on a spec. So I'd want to separate like normal Linux kernel development from here's a new standard that we want all kind of vendors to adhere to, and that's more where the kernel SIG can have input.
Oh yeah, another quick question is like mostly like confidential computing relates to two folders in the Linux. One is like a driver folder for the Cocoa driver, etc. For the like attestation report, and the other one is for like in the security folder, under like mostly under like integrity measurement architecture. So like for the security folder, I like there do have a committee and maintainers for this part, but for the driver folder, I like currently there's no like email list and stuff like that to maintain the like a Cocoa drivers, etc. So is it possible to connect the like a kernel SIG in CCC with like a Cocoa driver stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I will say all the confidential computing changes that go to the Linux Cocoa list. So I would check that first. But yeah, actually, I do have to step out. Yeah, so I'm kind of trying to slam a lot of content into a few parting shots. So maybe I'll pause here and circle back in the new year at the next meeting, so I can have.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, sorry about that.
All right.
But yeah,
thanks, Dan.
Thanks for the invite, Dan. Yeah, sorry to have the overlap.
Yeah, no worries.
Yep.
So I think that the really good questions from Zhang Wenhui is, I think these are good questions that we can sort out by having this SIG, by having kernel maintainers like Dan Williams and maintainers from other parts of the kernel join us, where at least, I'll speak for myself. I'm not a kernel maintainer. I don't consider myself fluent in the practices there. And so by having those of us who work full-time on confidential computing be able to interact with people who work full-time on the kernel, we can answer some of these questions, like what were just brought up, but then also get to more quickly upstream the changes that we all require in order to bring confidential computing into the mainstream. So the text is what I just had up. So actually maybe just flip back to that. And I'll walk us through this real quickly, but really in a nutshell, what this amounts to is we're proposing to have a recurring meeting series where we bring these two communities together and help try to accelerate the rate that we can get this code upstreamed into the kernel. The issue that Dan was going to talk about is linked within here. It's the first citation at the end, and we'll talk about that at the beginning of the year. So the scope is what I guess I'm just going to repeat myself here, that we want to be able to get any of these discussions. My view is that it's primarily things that are not yet on the Linux kernel mail list. So before we start going down different paths over a period of years on LKML, if we can try to coordinate some of that beforehand, we shorten up what might be months or even years of effort by trying to get all the ideas on the table initially in a higher bandwidth form of a meeting rather than a mail list. And then there's also this case that, if we come up with something that, actually what we really need to do is promote a certain standard in IETF or some other organization. Well, we also have the mechanism to do that now, where we've got the group of people necessary that would be around to do that. And then the rest of this is what I felt was like necessary for us to have a properly structured SIG, that we have this duality of we don't want a whole bunch of overhead from unnecessary processes and decisional stuff, but then we also kind of want to know what they are. So the synopsis of this is we don't want this to be a decision body. We want this to be mostly a communication body. If we need a decision to happen, we'll go ahead and percolate it up to the TAC, where we have processes for voting and stuff, but we don't want to get in the way of the SIG by trying to have some sort of like board of voting people and come up with a bunch of rules for that. Because frankly, I think that's just a waste of time. And then there's a stab at some initial logistics here to meet bi-weekly, but I think we sort that out as we get underway. So the ask here would be if we do decide to approve this today, that in the beginning of 2024, each of you identifies people from your company that are kernel maintainers, confidential computing architects that are appropriate to join this meeting series and then can contribute to it. And that is, I think that's everything in this proposal. Questions, comments? I will say that as I reviewed the feedback on here, oh, go ahead, Yash.
So, okay, I read the discussion on LKML, and then also here I spoke with Paolo Bonzini, who has commented on this pull request. And what he's the upstream KVM maintainer, not the kernel maintainer, but he does contribute to the kernel. What his concern was is that, at least from his point of view, there isn't enough confidential computing work happening that would make him join the calls. But again, that's just from the KVM standpoint. That might not be true for others. So that was a concern that he brought up. I can invite other kernel maintainers, but I can't guarantee that they'll join. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for mentioning his feedback. So I had an opportunity to meet with Paolo at the Linux Plumbers Conference.
Oh, right, that's true. I forgot about that, sorry.
No, that's fine, because he didn't share that particular feedback with me, but he did have some concerns initially of, was this going to, I think I'll have trouble trying to characterize what his concerns were, but I think where we ended was positively, that he recognized this is like a forum that he runs for KVM, where you get people together to talk so that people have some mode besides the mail list. And so that I interpreted that as a positive outcome of that decision, or that discussion rather. I also had some verbal feedback from somebody at Plumbers that, just so I make sure that I try to air all of the criticism, there was a point of concern that this was going to be an obstacle before he could submit a patch to the mail list, that he had to first bring it to this forum. And so we discussed that, and that's not the intent. We, again, want to really kind of focus on stuff before it's come to the point of writing a patch. What do these architectures look like? Can we help people see the similarities and differences between them so that when people do sit down to write a patch, that's more clear, and we can not have to do 17 versions of a patch before it gets accepted. So if there's no other feedback, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote on this. People feel like that they're ready to vote on this if I do that? Seeing some heads nod, thumbs up. Great. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's do a roll call vote of adding, well, actually, I think we have enough of us live. Maybe not. What I was about to ask is that you kind of record your vote by just approving the PR, but we'll do both. So if you wouldn't mind approving the PR, and that's kind of easier for people from the kernel community to come and see this than going to look at our meeting minutes and see the vote. But I'll also go ahead and do the vote since I think we've lost Mark. Yeah. Okay. So we've lost ARM, and so Google.
Voting yes.
Thank you. And Intel votes yes. Microsoft.
Votes yes.
Thank you. And Red Hat.
Votes yes.
Thank you. All right, so that is a unanimous vote of those present. And if you each wouldn't mind just putting that also in the PR, that would be great. I already put the link in the chat. Okay, so that is actually the bulk, since we're going to have to move this kernel ABI talk to next year. That's the bulk of what I wanted to get accomplished today. Since we have time remaining, do we still have Chris? Chris, was there more that you wanted to say on this RFI topic?
So I think I had circulated a document that the GRC team is working to finalize. I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. If anybody here has any, additional inputs or suggestions, or just wants to track what's going on, we'd love extra eyes on it. So I'm going to put it in the chat here. Also, the meeting with the Defense Innovation Board team in the DoD is scheduled for 3:15 to 3:45 on Monday, the 18th. We haven't completely confirmed that, but if people want to be part of that, just let Mark or myself know.
Great, and then you've got the Zoom for the GRC for that, or you've got some other mechanism?
We're looking for the Defense Innovation Board. They'll use Zoom Gov or something like that. They're not allowed to use.
Oh, this is actually Zoom with that board. I thought it was like a pre-meeting before
It's not with they're going to, so the plan is to invite the team that's part of the DoD's Office of the Secretary of Defense Research and Innovation organization. I can't remember the exact name of the subgroup. So they're going to invite, they said they would invite the Defense Innovation Board members if they're available, but it's primarily with the team that's managing the Defense Innovation Board as opposed to the Defense Innovation Board proper.
Okay.
I know, sorry, that's kind of convoluted. And I'm hoping to work with Mark to finalize this document today so that we can get it to them.
Sounds good. So just gonna correct this. We'll just say there's a meeting Monday, and then did you send any of that to the TAC list, or is it all on the GRC list?
I had sent this link to the TAC several weeks ago because the original deadline for the RFI was several weeks ago. So it's in there already, but and some of you have commented on it previously.
Okay. Yeah, I recall you bringing that up, and then I felt like we were past the due date. So it's nice that there's still some opportunity to get that in.
Yeah, success criteria for this is to see if we could get confidential computing recognized and mentioned in their report, which is slated to be published on January 26th, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I think I'm gonna let people get on with their day then. I don't think we have any other business. The only other thing that I was gonna do is take people through the 2023 priorities doc and try to make sure that we documented everything. I'm gonna work with people offline because I think that'll be more productive. But if you've got something that you've accomplished in our stated 2023 goals, I don't know if anybody has the link for that doc handy. I don't have it open, but if you can go in there, I know Ben went through and tagged people a couple weeks ago, asking them to update that. But we'll use that as the content for putting out our end of the year announcements. Probably write that in the beginning of January, and then also use that to take to the board to remind them what we've accomplished and kind of set up our goals for 2024. Thanks, Yash. Anything else from anybody? Well, then I will say thanks for a great 2023. I think if you do look through that doc, you'll see that we actually accomplished quite a bit for confidential computing, and I think you can all be proud of yourselves for what you've done to help move that forward. And I look forward to seeing everybody again in January.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks for everything you did this year, Dan.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, guys. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Bye bye.